Hello, and welcome to another short box from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar, and this week we'll be talking about the Black Crusades, or as the Traitor Legions call them, the Long War.
Well, when we last left Abbadon, he was gaining power. And in this episode, we'll be putting the finishing touches on his rise to power before he starts his big push into the Empire of Man. In 557.M38, the War Master of Chaos began one of his final raids against the Imperium in the 9th Black Crusade with the intent of bringing about the demise of the naval fortress of Cancephalos. Once again, Abbadon uses an oldie but a goodie and led his forces against the heavy populations of a nearby world of Anticanus, hoping to draw the naval forces out of Cancephalos. Monarchive, the hive city that served as the seat of Anticanus' imperial commander, was besieged by Abbadon's vanguard. The Black Legionnaires burned and butchered their way through the lower levels, whilst Abbadon himself stormed the inner sanctums. The hive populations were slowly destroyed by the slaughter. By the time the forces of the Astra Militarum arrived from Cancephalos to reinforce the desperate survivors, Abbadon and his favored legionnaires had already left orbit, dropping a dozen cyclonic warheads onto the ruins of Monarchive in a last gesture of contempt. The 17th standard year-long war that ensued robbed both Anticanus and Cancephalos of their most precious resource, manpower. Without the fleets of Cancephalos to stop him, Abbadon was able to ravage the rest of the sector at will, and his sorcerers were free to conduct the rituals required to weaken the walls of reality in that region of space with impunity. During this time, the Lamenter's Space Marine chapter was recalled, along with a number of other crusading chapters, by the High Lords of Terra to help deal with the rising threats of incursion from the Eye of Terror. Fierce fighting that saw the extinction of two chapters, ironically both named the Celestial Sword by some heir of the Adeptus Administratum, and they were actually from two completely foundings, but regardless, ensued throughout the sector. The Lamenter's horrible reputation for suffering bitter reversals and dark turns of fate worked against them during their defense of the hive world of Corellia from a chaos attack. Now, if you've been listening to the Badab Wars Voxes that I've just started, and if you haven't, go ahead and check them out. You already know who the Lamenters are. For those of you who haven't yet, to put it bluntly, the Lamenters suffer from, well, bad luck. I honestly don't know how else to describe it, yet there you have it. They also ended up on the losing side of the Badab War and were forced to do a punitive 100-year crusade, but that came much later in the 41st millennium. Just know that throughout the chapter's history, the Lamenters have suffered from the worst luck imaginable, and other Space Marine chapters think so little of them because of this, that they often refuse to fight with them. Personally, this makes me look at the Lamenters as more lovable losers than wretches. I mean, we will see in a few minutes that they do not lack courage, nor do they sway from what needs to be done, whatever their luck. Like I was saying, the superstitious bound mortifactors chapter refused to fight alongside the Lamenters, abandoning the planet rather than serve beside fellow Astartes they considered cursed. Unwilling to desert the Hive world's population, the Lamenters held out alone against the Black Legion's onslaught for 6 solar weeks, suffering horrendous losses until the Ultramarines and White Scars led an Imperial battle group that broke through the Chaos War fleet to relieve Corellia. Reduced to barely 200 surviving battle brothers by their sacrifice, the Lamenters were deemed lost when, yet again, bad luck happens and their fleet disappears into a warp storm soon afterwards, only to reappear more than a standard century later on the edge of the Segmentum Cellar, having slowly battled their way back from the outer void. Now, like I mentioned, Lamenters are made of pretty sturdy stuff. Yet, getting back to Abbadon, with his raid completed, he disappeared back into the Eye, and began to get in contact with the fallen Primarch Perturabo, wishing to form a strong alliance. Now, try as I might, I cannot find anything solid on what the fallen Primarchs think of the new War Master of Chaos. And obviously, I think they all have different opinions of him. For example, I think Fulgrim is so drugged out of his mind with Slaanesh pleasures he could give a fart in a sewer system about him. Angron is pretty much mad. So yet another Primarch that doesn't really think about the new War Master. And your guess on what Tzeentch's boy Magnus thinks of him is probably as good as mine. That leaves Mortarion, who probably hates him, but I say that simply because Mortarion hates everyone. Lorgar, which I pretty much would prefer never to talk about. And Perturabo. Now, Perturabo and Abbadon had met during the Horus Heresy, and that meeting had not ended too terribly well. Perturabo picked Abbadon up with one hand and hurled him across the room. Yet after this, the Iron Lord's anger quickly abated and they finished their conversation, now that Abbadon had been properly cowed. Yet, that was ages ago, and both had grown in power since that point. While Abbadon had been getting his forces together, ready to start his war in earnest, Perturabo secured a new demon world named Mendragard, crafting a terrible fortress world where his soldiers ruled in vast towers. Perturbabo's stronghold, Fortress of Hate, is said to be the most redoubtable of fortress worlds. Today, the Iron Warriors give their greatest loyalty to Perturabo for saving them from sacrifice in the name of the Emperor. Perturabo has spent much of the subsequent millennia studying the defenses of Segmentum Obscurus and establishing a network of techno-cultist informants. It seems the Lord of Iron is planning something, but what it is, I cannot say. Whatever he was planning, he agreed to join Abbadon on his 10th Black Crusade in 001.M39. The reason for this alliance was actually fairly simple. Abbadon would help Perturabo defeat the Iron Hands, and in return, the Lord of Iron opened an ancient warp route out of the Eye of Terror for the Despoiler's Black Fleet. The passage, calculated over several agonizing months by the tortured machine spirits of a chain of enslaved cogators, allowing Abbadon's forces to steal past the layered defenses of the Cadian Gate and into the Halekha subsector of Scarus Sector. Once again, Abbadon employed a carefully planned feint, sending the Black Legion fleet against Thracian Primaris, the capital world of Halicia, while he attacked elsewhere. The Despoiler also scattered his warlords across the sector, and, on scores of planets, traitor vessels thundered down from the skies to kill and maim Imperial citizens. While his warlords indulged themselves in the slaughter of Imperial worlds, Abbadon traveled with the Iron Warriors to the Medusa system, the volcanic homeworld of the Iron Hands Space Marine chapter. From the ancient flagship Vengeful Spirit, Abbadon watched as the Iron Warriors laid siege to the Loyalist chapter. In a protracted war of attrition, the Iron Warriors systematically assaulted the outer worlds of the Medusa system, tearing down the Loyalist defenses one by one. In the burning light of their ruined fortifications, the Iron Hands struggled to hold back the traitors, buying time for their supported companies to arrive. Yet, before the bulk of the Iron Hands and their Imperial allies could arrive, Abbadon and his Iron Warriors retreated, leaving hundreds of dead Loyalist Space Marines in their wake. Though the Medusa still stood as an Imperial bulwark, Abbadon had learned much about its defenses and the Iron Hands themselves, both of which he would put to good use later. Now, while this seems like the closest thing to a failure so far when it comes to Abbadon's Black Crusades, the War Master still gained a few advantages from this strange endeavor. 1. As always, an destruction to the Empire Abbadon sees as a positive. And 2, it started some positive workings between the Iron Warriors and the Black Legion. Perhaps this was Abbadon's plan, so he could call on even more troops in the coming years. Yet what happens next, I can say, is Abbadon's first true defeat. An utter failure. Now, what the War Master's plan was initially for the 11th Black Crusade in 301.M39, none can really say because it started off so badly. You see, Abbadon bound a demon of Tzeentch within the oculus of his flagship, hoping to find a path through the tumultuous warp storms, through the Eye of Terror into Imperial space for his Black Fleet. Unfortunately, the evil thing was tormented with impossible riddles and twisting falsehoods. The demon was driven completely insane, leading Abbadon thousands of light years off course. Writhing in its pain, the demon tore its own substance into a vortex of madness, bending time and space around the fleet. Abbadon's warships were scattered across the void of real space. Undaunted by the failure of his demonic navigator, Abbadon loosed his Black Legion upon the nearest planet, the imperial cardinal world of Reloria. Yet, as they descended on Reloria, the traders encountered a rival for their prize, a huge orc rogue, led by the warlord Morgar Undred Teeth. In a vicious and chaotic three-sided war, demons and orcs ripped each other apart in the burning ruins of Reloria's vast reflecting towers. Now, when it comes to the orcs and the powers of chaos, there are a few things you should know. 1. Orcs, when they travel through the warp, they don't have as much protection from the entities of the warp. In fact, oftentimes, whole squabbles of demons will materialize on orc warships. Now, this doesn't stop the orcs. Far from it. Normally, they get pretty bored when flying through the warp. I mean, sure, the pretty colors and screams of lost souls are entertaining for a bit, but then it seems to just blend together, and the greenskins tend to get a little bored. And soon, well, as orcs do, it kind of tends to infighting. But then these demons show up and provide some much-needed in-flight entertainment. To an orc, it's not a good flight unless they get to grump some good things. You see, why they can do this without going completely mad has to do with their warg energies, which makes them almost impossible to corrupt with chaos. Of course, this wasn't going to stop Abbadon from trying. He used this chance encounter with the orcs to conduct unspeakable experiments with demons and alien creatures, attempting to fuse the material and the immaterial together into some new manner of horror that could be inflicted upon the forces of the Corpse Emperor. Fascinated by the psychic link that exists between orcs and their instinctive use of warp energy to power their technology and become even stronger as their warg progresses, Abbadon took thousands of the greenskin Xenos back with him to the Eye of Terror to continue his research. Now, it wouldn't surprise me at all if nothing came of this. And in fact, even if it did work, I don't know how much it would amount to. You see, the few times I've found orcs that have been corrupted by the ruinous powers, they're normally singled out and destroyed by their own, because they're just too un-orky. There are more accounts of this with the Tyrannid gene stealers who try to spawn from orcs. The rest of the orc tribes and clans ostracize the infected orcs, and then eventually kill them because they don't smell right, or they seem un-orky. Now, regardless, with only some captured orcs, Abbadon gave up, accepting the loss the crusade was, and retreated from Reloria, leaving the battered survivors of humanity to the destruction at the hands of the remaining orcs. Now, next week, we have made it to the most important crusade to date, the 12th, also known as
the Gothic War,
where Abbadon finally makes his presence felt, with a full-scale war against the Empire. Now, while he will not gain true victory, such as a stronghold in the realm of reality, or a second leg of his crusade, such as Arana Macrog or Terra, he does gain some truly godlike weapons, tests the Imperium's resolve, and gathers an idea for their strength. Because what is to come next after the 12th Black Crusade will change the Milky Way system forever. Now, if you enjoyed this Vox, feel free to subscribe, comment, follow, and like. And if you really liked our stuff, please join our membership squad on our YouTube channel,
Tales of Ashtaraka.
With your support, we can continue to build and grow our Voxes, as well as some cool extra stuff for you guys that join. Once again, we need the support of you, our dear listeners, so we can continue to make a successful show that you all enjoy. We will also be opening up a shop for you guys so you can get some sweet swag. But until then, we need support in the form of members. If you're listening on Spotify, don't worry, you can help as well. If you click the support podcast button on any of the descriptions on Spotify, you can donate to our success as well. Well, I think that's enough grandstanding for me today. I'll just go ahead and get off my soapbox and say as always,
until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.